Hello, all you synth peeps, and welcome to Syntaur's Talking Synths podcast, episode 89. And this episode is dropping on August 5th, which is 808 Day Eve. So we thought it'd be a great time to celebrate the Roland TR-808, the most iconic drum machine ever made. And everybody's heard of an 808. Mm-hmm. Even people that don't know anything about music.
Yeah. Widely referenced.
Yeah.
Just the 808 number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see so many different 808 t-shirts, and even just the button pattern. I've even seen one that's 4 red rectangles, 4 orange, 4 yellow, 4 white. And
it's like its own flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. Such a machine. 1981 it came out. The TR stands for
something rhythm? Truncated rhythm?
Transistor rhythm.
Ah, okay. Almost.
And the curious thing was the transistors that Mr. Roland used to, no, his name wasn't Mr. Roland, Kakahashi, used Kakahashi-san. The transistors that he used to make the sizzly sound of the 808 were purposely faulty transistors. And so I guess they hand selected some, or I don't know, got
there's
batches
a lot of lore on that.
Yeah.
What was I think it was intentional though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, supposedly it was intentional. And in fact, there were about 12,000 TR-808s made, and the reason they stopped making them was because they could no longer get those faulty transistors. The transistor technology or whatever, the faulty ones got discontinued, and he no longer had a source for those parts. So he then said, okay, we're gonna make a 909 instead, which is one of your personal favorites. Yeah. So about 12,000 of these out in the wild, and they came out in 1981. And I remember a guitar player in our band, Kelvin Pittman, bought one of these, and he was going to use it, or did use it. We did some demos with it, and at the time, it was cool because no longer, if you wanted to do a demo, no longer did you have to rent a studio, pay huge studio hourly rates, get a drummer in there, mic up the drums, spend hours getting good drum sounds. I mean, recording drums back in the 1980s was horrendously expensive if you wanted to do it right. And all of a sudden, here's this machine that would do drum-ish sounds, and it was only $1,200, which was a lot of money back then, but it was a lot less than, if you were regularly doing demos and stuff, it was great to have. But it sounded like crap. It didn't sound like drums at all, and everyone realized that, and pretty soon you could get them for less than $100 on the used market. So pretty amazing.
Amazing stories about people getting them, or getting 3 or 4 of them at a pawn stop for like $150. Yeah. Like some guy came in, I wish I could remember his name, but he mowed lawns when he was a kid, and he would use that money to buy Roland stuff, and he would flip it to the DJs in Houston, and that's how he used to make his money. But he's like, yeah, I used to have 4 or 5 of those. I couldn't get rid of them. It's like, wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah, how fast things change.
Yeah, and then they were discovered by the hip hop world. Not just the hip hop world, electronica.
Yeah, I had Chicago and Detroit mostly, I think. But then again, it's hard to say who exactly started to do it. But I'm sure people in the UK were discovering them too. But there were. I'm not. The first track, I can't really think of what.
Some famous ones: Planet Rock, Africa Bambaataa. But perhaps maybe the most significant, Marvin Gaye's "Sexual Healing," was the first 808 based song to really make it as a huge hit. And he did that back in the day when it's like, people are throwing these out with the trash.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that at that time, that they actually used it in a professional setting, which
Yeah.
It probably goes a long way to say what kind of a musician that they were, that they actually thought it sounded good. So
yeah, and or that here's the tool you're given, make some cool music with that,
right.
No matter what it sounds like, and a good musician can take that and run it. So started quite a craze.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're talking about you could get them for less than $100 back in the day. But right before we started this podcast a few minutes ago, I went on my computer and just read the little blurb that we have on the Syntaur.com site about the TR-808, and the last sentence was, now you're lucky if you can get them for, now you're lucky if you can pick up a TR-808 for less than $4,000. And I immediately looked at current prices and said, I'm going to change that to $5,000.
Yeah,
so yeah, they go up quickly. So this one right here is my retirement. Yeah, not really, but
how much? Because you bought this for R&D, right? This
yeah.
was for. Do you remember how much you got it for?
Well, I got it as part of a package deal with a bunch of other things, so it's hard to say, but okay, I got it for a good price.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a four-figure price. But
yeah, it seems like everyone that has one of these, or the 909, or this, they always have a fun story on how they got it, and it's some kind of wild adventure. Yeah.
No, I don't have a fun story on it. I've got this, and there was a number of other things we got with it, and it was one of very few instances, two actually, where I made a deal with someone, traveled, hours and hours to consummate that deal, and when I get there, it's like, I'm not going to include this in the deal, and I'm going to need this much money more. It's like, what? I almost walked away from the whole thing because I don't like to do business with people like that, but I didn't, and I ended up with some stuff and still got a reasonable deal. But anyway, so that's
probably a good thing you did it, because now you'd be paying what?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. So another aspect of the TR-808 that I wanted to bring up was, because it's become so iconic, there are repro parts for this thing. We have so many parts. So if anyone out there has a TR-8 and they need, this potentiometer or this knob,
and we'll link that down below.
Yeah.
So our parts page.
Yeah. Or these switches or whatever. We have a ton of parts for this. And of course, you can't get them from Roland anymore. So these are repro parts that are being made to serve the TR-808 world. In fact, here's one right now. In fact, we've been out of this for a long time, and we just got a new stock. This is the switchboard right here, of course, with the iconic colored buttons. And
that's new.
Yes, this is a brand new part, and it's plug and play, so there's no soldering involved or anything. You just take your TR-808 apart, unplug some cables, plug the new one in, screw it all back together.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's
brand new buttons.
It's got the colors, and we could probably sell this just as a fun little part.
These definitely feel a lot more, precise.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great day and age to own a TR-808 because you can keep it rolling.
Yeah, keep it rolling. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, back in 1980, it was a tough time to sync stuff together.
Right.
And you've just traveled back in time to 1980 and experienced that.
Well, I'll try to explain everything we also have on here. So we have an original SH-101, a Behringer TD3,
TB303 knockoff.
Yeah, the 303 clone, and then the Roland TR-8, which is, I guess, their new version of the 808, right? So there's a TR-8S, which has different functions. That's the newer one, and then there's the TR-08, which is the boutique one that actually kind of looks like this. So,
are they? Which of those, if any, are analog drum sounds like the TR-808?
The TR-08,
okay.
The boutique looking one. Behringer makes one that's all analog, but that's Behringer, and I'm going to leave that out the window, and whatever.
And I guess we should say, emphasize that the TR-808, made in 1980, it creates its sounds by analog synthesis, basically.
Right.
And it was the first drum machine, no, it was one of the first drum machines where you could actually program your own rhythms. Before that, they had drum machines, but it was like the CR-78 or something, where it's like, patterns. All right, here's samba and here's waltz and whatever, and you get those patterns, and that's what you got. But with the TR-808, you can actually program your own patterns, and the LM1 from Lynn around the same time did the same thing, only with digital samples drums, and so they sound totally different.
Right.
So anyway,
yeah.
I co-opted your...
No, I was just trying to explain, because like, I guess Roland, was it the same time as MIDI, or before it, or slightly after it? I guess DynSync was
yeah, it was
their version
slightly before MIDI.
Right, and it used the same 5-pin plug, right? But I think the cable has to be different in order to send it properly. But there's DIN out and then DIN in, and like the TR-8, God, this is driving me crazy. Oh my God, too much TRs. So there's a DIN out and in on the TR-8. So if you trigger this, it will send a clock signal to, let's say, MC202 or anything else that has DIN sync, it will trigger it to. And then those devices might not have DIN, and they might only have DIN out. So you can't trigger them that way, and then you start running into all these problems where the 909 has MIDI, but some of the other ones don't have MIDI, so you need some kind of like syncing option, right? So there's a few options, and I think this is one of them, the MSQ100. So you have like a MIDI in, out, through, and then sync in and out, and sync is supposed to stand for DIN sync. But this is more of like a recorder, so you can actually sequence something and trigger it. And then you have like the SBX10, which is kind of a nice price tag on there, so you know what it's worth. This is kind of less of a sequencer, but more of a converter. So you have MIDI, DIN, and then time base, which I'm not quite sure what time base is, so if anybody can explain that in the comments, that would be nice. But yeah, so you can use these to convert stuff, and as I spent all morning trying to do was, I was trying to send my TR-8 clock signal, MIDI clock signal, to trigger everything, and I couldn't seem to get it to work. It was sending like dotted signals. Very confusing.
And I don't really know much about syncing all this stuff together, but when you said MIDI and DIN sync, same connector, I do know that MIDI cables, MIDI only uses 3 of the 5 pins of its cable, and so it could be that with DIN sync you need a cable that has all 5 wires. I don't know that that's
yeah, if anybody can make that
not,
clear, it would be nice.
Yeah, but I do know that MIDI only uses 3, and that could be a problem with using that type of cable.
So I mean, there's a long history with the 808, and I thought it'd be cool to contrast between the two of, what was this, 81, and this is 2014-ish, 13. So how many years is that? 90, 30, 40 years? Yeah. 40-year difference.
Yeah, so show us some stuff.
All right, so I have it sending MIDI clock out to the 303, so I'm going to mute the 303, and I'm going to play something. You just got your regular step sequence. It's not bad. Not bad. It sounds pretty good. I like the kick drum. Kick drum's probably my favorite. And then you have this cool scatter option where you can reverse. So it's just kind of like a fun tool. Yeah.
And that illustrates something that to me is weird about the TR-808. Well, maybe not weird, but against my thinking. I think of it as a drum machine.
Yeah.
So I want to just be able to walk up to it and go and hit buttons.
Yeah.
But you can't do that. It's a rhythm programmer.
So and what's cool on this is you can do instrument play or instant record. So if you hit play, so you turn these up. instrument.
All right.
Yeah, so you could do
That's
that too.
what I like.
Yeah, yeah.
I like to push a button and hear
Yeah.
some noise.
I'll trade you. Yeah, I'll trade you.
Well, play us some TR-808. I guess we ought to hear the real thing since this is a TR-808 episode.
Okay. I tell you immediately it sounds better, but
And that distinctive cowbell.
yeah. Okay. My favorite thing about the 808 is that you have all the levels, so you can turn them on and off and actually live play it. Even though you can do that with this, doing it with this is way more. It's more
authentic.
It just feels better than having 800 knobs.
Yeah.
You know.
And you got the SH-101 doing something?
Yeah. So if you just go.
And so you have a sequence playing on the SH-101.
Yes.
You hit play, but it doesn't do anything because you get your external clock in.
So on the SH1, there's an external clock in, and what you can do with the 808 is out of the three, there's an accent, clap, and then I think a cymbal.
That you can use for triggers.
Right, so it's depending on how you have it sequenced in here is when it's going to send a pulse. So
Yeah.
you could hit all 16 and it would go through all 16 notes that you pre-program on the sequencer, and then it just goes in order
Right.
with it, which I really like that. I really wish that functionality was with a lot of synthesizers. It's just a lot of fun to work that way. Considering it's from the 80s, it's just like so simple and straightforward, and it works every single time. It's like I just wish things work like that, you know. But
Yeah.
and then with the TR-8, I have the 303. Pick different kits. So
So how does this, where did these sounds come from? Are they digital samples? Or
right,
they...
so the TR-8 doesn't let you put your own samples on it, which is real mind-blowing thinking. The TR-8S lets you put your own samples on it.
But the sounds that are in there, are
right,
they
it's a mix of
samples
like
in-
808, 909 samples.
Okay.
So you can just, you pick what instrument it is, and then you have your kit or your instrument. So kick, you have 3. And then if you get the upgradable kit, the 7x7, you have to download the cloud. It's like $100, and it throws on 707, 727, 606, and then a few custom Roland sounds that you can pick from. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, one thing I'm fascinated by with the real 808 is that it's all analog, and that the sounds were created with basically synthesis. And so it's really fascinating to me to undo each of those sounds, figure out how it was created, and then once you do that, you can take a regular synthesizer and recreate them.
Right.
So I've had a lot of fun with doing that with the Novation Bass Station 2. And so, like I started with the cowbell, the ubiquitous 808 cowbell, and I wish I could just go gunk gunk and play it, but I can't. But you can take apart that cowbell sound and you find that it's two sine waves stacked on top of each other and at close to a perfect fifth tuning, and then just enveloped. There it is.
Yeah.
Such an iconic sound, recognizable all over the place. So I basically recreated that on the wave state, wave state bass station.
Yeah. That's all right. It's pretty close though.
So it just needs to be tuned a little bit. But anyway, it's really cool to me to be able to undo, analyze kind of the sound there and recreate it here. And so I've kind of done the same thing with the cymbals, the snare drum, and with the snare drum, you can control the amount of noise, and that's equivalent to the, what do they call it, snappy button or snappy knob? Yeah, on here. So there's some kind of little triggering thing going on that I haven't mastered yet, but you can hear a little bit extra pop on some of those.
It's like the weird cousin of the 808. It kind of sounds like one.
Yeah, and the clap was the hardest to do, and it's not real good, but it's sort of clap-ish. But when you take apart the 808 clap, it's a lot of noise signal, and it's a lot of real fast triggering. And so I use the LFO going real fast on a sawtooth wave, I think, to kind of do several triggers when you hit the clap, and then smoothed it out with the distortion, I think, that the Bass Station 2 allows you to have. So this to me was a fascinating project, to be able to do on a monophonic synthesizer that plays one note at a time and has two oscillators. So
and that's incorporating the Aphex mod to play patches differently.
Yes, you do have to have the Aphex mod in here to be able to do all those across the keyboard. If you didn't have that, if you have the older version of the operating system, you could program each of these sounds, but you couldn't put them all together on the same keyboard. But it just blows my mind to be able to do a drum kit and an 808 realistic sounding drum kit on a monophonic synthesizer with two
well
oscillators.
Priced and does so much other stuff too, on top of that.
So I'm having big fun with this little bad boy.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is you can do any of these sounds on any monophonic synthesizer that has a couple of oscillators.
I know a few people making or even with the Juno 106 making 808 sounds and stuff like that with the Juno and stuff,
So like the cowbell, for instance, you take two sine waves at specific frequencies, just dial them in, put an envelope on it, and you got the 808 cowbell. So yeah, you could do that on a Juno 106, you could do it on anything that has two oscillators.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And for the Roland engineers back in 1980 to go through and figure that stuff out and make a drum machine that worked like that, that's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, it must have been like a real letdown to know that you went through all that effort when it didn't succeed.
Yeah, that's a good point. The TR-808 was a commercial flop.
Yeah.
Go figure. And now I could put this one on the market and once I put that knob back on.
Yeah, that's probably worth about $1,000, just the start and stop button.
But this on the market today, $6,500.
Yeah.
Some are in the 7,000s. Some are in the 10,000s for sale. But
there's always somebody asking a ridiculous price. But
yeah.
I mean, if you could get one for $5,000 right now,
you're lucky.
$4,000 would be a good deal. If you get $4,000, it would be a good deal. Yeah.
If you search Reverb right now, you won't find any that have sold in the $4,000s.
Yeah.
They're all $5,000 and above. So that's pretty good for a commercial flop.
It's almost at that point to where like you can't even find a broken one anymore because they've all been fixed up. So they're all like expensive.
Yeah. So pretty cool machine, amazingly iconic these days, and worthy of having its own day. So,
yeah.
Anything else to add on 808 business?
I don't think so. I think I'll probably just do a little jam or something at the end here, and let that roll out. And I guess we'll say modulator, but it's not modulator just yet. It's after the jam. But.
And plus, there's not a modulation wheel on this. Oh, we can modulate around the
SH?
SH-101.
Okay.
All right. Jam out, sir.
Okay.